Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to use this Glimmering Snowflakes die and hot foil plate set from Spellbinders. And I wanted to play around with it, creating a snowfall background on some ink blended cardstock. I'm also going to try a few things with hot foil that I haven't tried before, but the very first step is ink blending my background. So I'm using some hammermill cardstock here because it's perfect for foiling, and I'm taking 3 different distress inks and ink blending my background. Now this background doesn't need to be absolutely perfectly ink blended. I just want to get some color in there. The background itself isn't the focal point, it's more to highlight the snowflake. So the distress ink colors I'm using are Speckled Egg, Mermaid Lagoon, and Uncharted Mariner. I love the color of blue that these create, and I wanted to have a nice light center with a dark outline here. So I'm using just some ink blending brushes just to create that blend. I started in the center with the Speckled Egg, going around now with the Mermaid Lagoon, and then the Uncharted Mariner is just going to really deepen the color on the outside of this piece here. This Uncharted Mariner is just a really nice dark teal color, perfect for skies and perfect for framing it in here. And it's going to help those white snowflakes that I'm going to create play off really nicely. I love too that it also frames this whole piece here. It's become one of my favorite colors for doing skies, beachy, oceany pieces because it's the perfect color tone for that, as well as things like this. So once I have this completely inked, I'm going to clean up the ink off my media mat, and then I'm going to pull out my Glimmer machine and heat that up. Now I'm going to start with white foil, and then I'm going to play around with some Prism foil with it as well. So my plate is about half the size of this background here. So I have a piece of foil that's a little bit bigger than my plate. I am taping it in place because I want to make sure that this doesn't shift while I take it out of my machine. I put it on the hot Glimmer machine, plate side down, pretty side of the foil facing the plate, and then on my cardstock. Once the Glimmer machine timer has gone off, I put it through my Platinum 6 machine for the pressure and then pull that foil off. I'm going to do exactly the same process for the other side of the cardstock, and these snowflakes are kind of random enough that I can make sure that I don't have a repeating pattern. I just flipped that plate over completely so then I don't see a repeating pattern, and I repeated that exact same process. Now these background pieces here, the negative part of that white foil, I'm not going to let that go to waste, so I am testing it out, seeing if I can foil on this specialty cardstock. So this is some holographic foil that I happen to have, and I'm just curious if this will hot foil. I am going to tape everything in place, so I'm making sure to put the tape in place or in the places that I have some snowflakes that aren't perfect, that are either a little bit wrinkled or I've got half a snowflake or it's right on the edge of the foil. So I'm not going to be using them in the final product anyways. So if it gets messed up with tape, it's no big deal. And I absolutely love how that white foil looks on that holographic foil. Now that white foil is opaque and matte, so it's a really nice play with the shininess from the holographic foil. So I want to have some sentiments for my card as well. So I'm using this Joyful Sentiment set from Spellbinders as well. And I love the fact that when you use this set, you create several sentiments at one time. So I'm only going to need one for this particular card, but I'm going to do all of them. And I'm also going to do the negative foiling for this. So then when I'm done, I will have a whole bunch of sentiments already ready for future cards. So now that I have the positive and the negative foiling done, I can turn off and put away my Glimmer machine to cool down. And then I'm going to tape those die cuts in place. Now I always make sure to put that tape where it's not on top of the foil. The pressure from that die going through the machine, if you put tape on that foil, it does affect the finish. So always make sure to put the tape where it's not going to affect that. While I'm die cutting, I'm cutting a bunch of extras out of scraps just to put onto the back of these sentiments. It's just going to make them a lot more solid, give them a little bit of dimension, and it's a great way to use up those scraps. And it doesn't need to be perfect scraps. Some of those scraps have a little bit of the foil on them. It's going to be glued behind, so you're never going to see it. While I have my machine out, I'm doing exactly the same thing with the snowflakes die that comes with the Glimmering Snowflakes set. It will die cut those negative foiled snowflakes that I did on the holographic foil, and I'm going to use these for embellishments on my card. With everything done, I'm taking out my Barely Art glue. I've got it in a fine tip bottle, and I'm going to glue the extra pieces of the die cut sentiments on the back of the sentiment that I chose for this particular card and set that aside to dry. And then I'm taking my background here and gluing that onto my card base. These die cuts, I'm just going to be using them for embellishments for the front. Now, I didn't add any extra dimension behind them. You could have if you want them to pop out a little bit more. I just chose to have them glued on flat. I wanted my sentiment to have a little bit more dimension than the snowflakes do. And I also plan to add something else to the snowflakes that's going to add a little bit of dimension to part of them. So just using that Barely Art glue to glue down those snowflakes. Now, I am only using the snowflakes from this hot foil and die set. This card would look fantastic with a little bit larger snowflake, kind of as a focal point. I didn't have one that was the perfect size for what I was wanting and couldn't find one that I could get in a reasonable amount of time, and really wanted to get this idea out of my head and play around with this. So I think this is great just on its own, but it would also be fantastic with a little bit larger snowflake. And I know with the Glimmering Snowflakes, the line that's from, there are some larger ones there. I just don't happen to have it. So as I glue these down, I am taking some of the snowflakes that have pieces cut off or are cut in half. And there's one that I even cut in half for this particular thing. Background images always look best when something is going off of the side. It just looks a little bit more natural. So I did that on purpose. Now here's where I wanted to add a little bit of dimension. I'm taking some Pink Fresh Iridescent Clear Drops, and I'm using that Barely Art glue, putting a little bit in the center of my snowflakes. And I'm only doing this on the ones that I have die cut. And I'm putting different size gems of these on here. So these come in a bunch of different sizes. The larger ones I'm putting on the larger snowflakes, the medium ones are on the medium snowflakes, and the small ones on the small snowflakes. You could also do this on the snowflakes in the background, but I'm going to do something a little bit different for them, just because I think if I put too many of these gems, it's just going to be too much. So I thought just doing it on the die cut ones was enough. And I realized that I had some a little bit too big ones on those medium snowflakes. So I pulled them off, set them aside so that glue can dry on them. It's not going to ruin the gem at all. I can still use them. And I'm choosing some smaller ones for those snowflakes. I'm using a pair of tweezers here to hold these in place. You could also use a jewel picker tool. That would be helpful as well. I just couldn't find one find mine for when I was doing this. So another alternative is using a pair of tweezers. These are fairly easy to grab with those tweezers, especially when they're laying flat on the table. And you'll see that I do turn them around to make them lay flat to be able to grab them a little bit easier. Now, this Barely Art glue starts to grab and dry fairly quickly, so I don't need to wait too long for them to hold on to those gems. So for my white hot foiled sentiments or snowflakes on the background there, I'm just taking a dot of Stickles and putting it in the center of the snowflake. You could add more. I could add it to more of that snowflake, but I really didn't want to take away from the pretty hot foiled snowflakes there. And in the end, we have a really beautiful, simple, elegant card, and I love how those snowflakes really pop on that background. I think this same technique would be really nice for a gift tag as well. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you being here. Have a fantastic day.